Hello, everybody. The next diagnosis we're talking about is schizophrenic disorders. There are a couple of different disorders that are labeled as schizophrenia or under this heading, but we're going to start out, and most of you found this when I was asking on Zoom which diagnosis you guys found the most interesting. Most of you actually said schizophrenia. And it really is pretty fascinating, although to me it's actually one of the more sad diagnoses because I know individuals with schizophrenia, and it is a disorder that is just so sad to watch how it affects a person's life, how it affects their relationships with others. Many of our homeless individuals out there on the streets actually may struggle from schizophrenia. Because they're the ones who are talking to people who aren't there, who act like they're seeing things that you don't see. And it is, like I said, just a very sad diagnosis. So let's get started with it. Okay, so it is a severe disorder in which the person suffers from what we call disorganized thinking, sometimes very bizarre behavior, hallucinations, and really the inability to distinguish between fantasy and reality. So here's the difference. A lot of people sometimes think that multiple personality, or what we now called dissociative identity disorder, they think that is schizophrenia, and it is not. DID, dissociative identity disorder, is a break with consciousness. Schizophrenia is a break with reality, and that is how you can tell the difference, okay? So schizophrenia is a break in reality, and they can't figure out what is real and what is not real. This is much more common than you would realize. 1 in every 100 people are actually diagnosed with schizophrenia. That's actually really, that is a lot of people. So there are a couple of terms that you're going to want to know. The first one is psychotic. Is the term applied to a person who is no longer able to perceive what is real and what is fantasy. Now, psychotic breaks are not only found in schizophrenia. It can also be found in any disorder where usually there's been a long lack of sleep, so like bipolar. When a person goes through a manic episode, sometimes they haven't slept for days, and at some point they will start seeing things that aren't there or hearing voices that aren't there. So it's not always just strictly a schizophrenia diagnosis if those are the symptoms, but it does mean that they are having psychotic issues. And again, the next thing I just told you, which is how is it different from dissociative disorder? Again, a break in reality versus a break in the state of consciousness. Okay, so what are some symptoms of schizophrenia? Well, the first one is delusions of persecution, believing that they're out to get me. I'm having a lot of paranoia. You might see individuals wearing like tin foil on them. I know we have a gentleman who walks around with trash bags wrapped around him. A lot of times they are trying to get away from somebody or something that they believe is out to get them. Delusions of grandeur. They have some can have what we call a God complex, where they honestly believe that they are God. There's a great movie out there, if you ever have a chance to see it, it's called The Fisher King. It is with Robin Williams, and he believes he is the Fisher King. And yeah, it's a great movie. Megalomania. So again, delusions of grandeur. I believe I am king. I believe I am queen. I am ruler. I am the president. All kinds of statements like that. Delusions of being controlled. So again, they might believe that the CIA is controlling their brain with radio waves, or aliens are controlling them, or something of that nature. Okay. They also might have hallucinations, which are false sensory perceptions, such as hearing voices that do not really exist. Hearing voices really is a common and key in diagnosing of schizophrenia. They may also have what we call disturbed speech and make up words or word salad, repeating words, linking words that sound alike. We call that clanging, but they don't make any sense together. So, mad, frad, bad, sad, dad, crad, lad, and again, just making up things or making up words. Emotional disturbance is another symptom of schizophrenia. The one thing that you might see somebody do is they'll look just very flat affect. In other words, they seem very flat as far as no emotion at all. They don't seem necessarily sad. They don't seem necessarily joyful or happy. They're just kind of flat in their face and don't really react or respond. It almost seems like a lack of emotions at all. They also, you could see symptoms of what we call catatonia. So they may just be staring off into space and not be able to hold a conversation at all. Or you might see them shake their head because they're trying to remove the bad thoughts. I have a relative who has schizophrenia, and we didn't see her for about 5 years, and in a period of time when we were not in contact with her, she was living alone, and just her and her cat, and no other really humans had much contact with her. She came to a family gathering, and it was so difficult to hold a conversation because she had not had another human being to challenge those thoughts that were going through her head. And so she would sit there, and even when nobody was talking to her, she sometimes would say, yeah. And she was answering those voices that were going on in her head. After about 3 days, this was a family time when family were together for about a week. After about 3 days, she actually started responding much better to having humans around her, and she became more talkative, more verbal, and she got into a much better space. But again, a lot of times they have these voices in their head, and it's difficult for them to figure out, are those voices real? Are they not real? This person, last time I saw her, she had lost tons of weight because the voices were telling her not to eat. She would go ahead and fix a meal for herself, but the voices were so loud in her head, she was starving herself. And so they finally had to get some medical intervention in to help with that. Here's an example of disorganized and delusional thinking. I'll let you read that. This morning when I was at Hillside, which is a hospital, I was making a movie. I was surrounded by movie stars. I'm Mary Poppins. Is this room painted blue to get me upset? My grandmother died 4 weeks after my 18th birthday. So as you can tell, it seems like this little paragraph, there's not a lot that flows together. There's not a lot that makes any sense that goes together. The belief or the delusion of I'm Mary Poppins kind of is put in there. So again, just an example. Other forms of delusion include the delusions of persecution. Are you out to get me? Did you paint this blue just to get me upset? Again, that delusion of persecution. Someone's following me, and then I have grandeur, I am king. Onset and development of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia typically strikes people when they are young and maturing into adulthood. Really, the common age is between 18 and 25 years old. Can you be younger? Yes, you can. Can you be older? Yes, you can. This relative that I was telling you about, she was always a little different. but it wasn't until I want to say she was around 30 when she was first had her first what we call psychotic break. Um, the diagnosis itself is of schizophrenia. There are no national boundaries. It affects both males and females equally, although men do tend to be struck earlier and more severely and slightly more often than women. Okay, so the next set of slides, which will be your last one for abnormal psychology, will be about personality disorders. So join me. It's super interesting.